Hey, Paul. Well, thank you so much for your time today and for joining us. It's great to have you here.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So, we understand that you transitioned into reporting on state and local tax about 5 years ago for Law 360, and which is, a big props to you for kind of volunteering, maybe voluntolding to step into this kind of realm that Judy and I live in on a day-to-day basis. Um, when you heard you were assigned or kind of picking up some state and local tax, what were your initial thoughts?
So I had applied at Law 360 for a state and local tax reporter position. So, I knew that I was, going to be learning a lot more about the state and local tax world. I didn't understand, or have a clue about all the intricacies that are involved in it. So I was definitely ready to learn. And I kind of joined at a good time to really be immersed in the whole world, because I was hired in January of 2018. And then, of course, Wayfair came down, 6 months later. And prior to that, I didn't know. I knew generally, online sales are not taxable. I had no idea why. Quill, physical presence, economic nexus, that was all stuff that I just, I didn't know in my prior reporting jobs, which generally focused on like local government budgets and things like that. So yeah, it was just, I didn't know what to expect. And I learned very quickly that there's a lot, here in the state and local tax world. And it was just, kind of had to hit the ground running and, get up to speed as quickly as I could, especially in the sales tax realm with Wayfair being issued, just 6 months after.
What do
Yeah.
you think was the hardest concept to kind of get your head around or to really kind of grasp? And don't worry, we
Uh,
probably still haven't grasped that concept yet.
Sure. Yeah, I was going to say, I'll caveat that with, I don't think there's any concept I've fully mastered yet in the last 5 years, but definitely anything that dealt with, like multi-state apportionment or, taxation of partnerships and things of that realm. That's just, I'd read an opinion or a bill just to see what was going on and something that we may report on. And it's just all the intricacies and, all the complexities and various factors that go into that. It's really something that was, kind of challenging, especially at first to wrap my head around. And, even still today, I know obviously the multi-state tax commission's got their partnership project and we've written about that. And, it's definitely very complex and, heady area. But I think initially that was anytime I saw some type of multi-state apportionment or partnership, I'd kind of get palpitations at first and say, okay,
Right?
what do I, what do I need to understand about this now to write about it?
And taxpayers really don't understand it. So they get very agitated. They always think it's a one size fits all approach. Why can't I do exactly what's in my own state and reapply that across the nation? I mean, they don't get it. I don't think a lot of tax preparers understand it because they work hard on federal. There's a lot to pay attention to there. And then the trickle down effect. So it's just sort of a convoluted area. I think it's just, and the thing that's fascinating to me is not every case matters to every client, right? So Wayfair is probably the largest, more broadest reaching case besides Quill and some of that historically, but you don't really see these different cases like the Maryland digital advertising tax that's been enacted, right? That only affects a certain type of taxpayer. So not everything is broadly applicable. So these bits and pieces can have a smaller effect or a larger effect depending on the taxpayer. So it's kind of interesting to decide how to report on it and why it matters. This is why people go, ugh, I don't want to know this. I just want to apply the same rules of the state of where I'm, headquartered kind of thing. So yeah, if you feel that way, imagine taxpayers feel that way. You're like studying it, reading it. They don't want to read it at all. So it's a lot to read.
I guess that's where, firms like yourself come in.
And people like you to put the news out for us. So we can't read every little thing either. We don't have the time or the bandwidth or the money to just give that up for free, right? So we count on resources such as yours to keep us up to speed on things that we can't be having our tentacles in every single moment of every day. So we're grateful for companies such as yours.
Right. So then, Paul, how do you determine what's newsworthy and reportable and what's worth your time, which then in turn is worth our time?
Sure. Well, like any news organization, we have, team of news assistants and, reporters that, kind of collaborate and look at issues or trends that are out there that, warrant, coverage. At Law 360 in general, tax is just one wire for them. But, we do a lot of reporting on, legal source documents, court opinions, briefs, legislation. And, typically if there's any type of appellate court case involving tax, that's generally going to be, newsworthy. But we do have, my editor has an LLM in tax. She was a practitioner for several years. So, so she's always helpful at, guiding things. We look at stuff and say, is this important? Is this not? But, you're right. There is so much content out there, thousands and thousands of bills and, probably hundreds of court cases every day that have legal briefs filed in them. We do check in regularly with, with sources, tax practitioners, state officials to some extent to, just kind of see what they're seeing out there, what trends are, what could be coming, down the pike as far as, anything that warrants news coverage. But, at the end of the day, it just comes down to, news judgment as well. And if we see something that, a bill that's maybe moved out of a tax writing committee, okay, that, obviously has some interest in the state house, what could it change? What could it mean, as far as corporate income tax, sales tax, whatever it is. But typically any type of court ruling involving, state and local tax is definitely something we look at. And, going from there, sometimes if a case is, large enough and warrants, further coverage throughout, we'll monitor dockets or any type of movement on it and, report on briefs and things of that nature, any type of filing until there's a final outcome.
Well, yeah, and sometimes it's even hard just to, follow those cases all the way through.
Yeah. Because I used to get every day I used to have a feed that gave me every single proposed bill. And it was just sort of overwhelming. I couldn't keep it up. I cannot read all that and pay attention. And what if it doesn't get traction and make it to the next level and the next level? I mean, we follow bills even locally in our Colorado Association of Commerce and Industry. We have a very active tax council. So we're tracking with every bill that gets sent. And I don't think we knew about that delivery fee that Colorado instituted before. It was a few months before it was enacted because it was in a different type of legislation, non-tax. So that's kind of an interesting issue, but we follow that. But if it's written and proposed and then voted on, and then is it going to go and who's going to vote on it? And so we always know that, how it's going to roll out. And then we make a decision if it's going to enact, to act and speak or write or oppose or say we acquiesce, we're happy with the choice. So we put that in actively. And I know that happens a lot with the other societies across our nation. And so, but you can't, because you just don't know. I mean, sometimes things get killed at a committee, so it is interesting how bills get done. And it's a very time consuming process to get to the final point of vote.
Oh, sure. And, there are often, we'll track bills, especially, like I said, if they're reported out of a tax writing committee. And, sometimes you don't see the move until the end of session. Sometimes, they'll get inserted into a conference committee at midnight and then voted on. And you have to catch up the next day. But it's, that's just one thing that, there's a large volume out there. But we do spend a good amount of time trying to track those to the extent we can, just to see as soon as something moves again, maybe it's picked up interest in the legislature.
And are you guys in connection with lobbyists at all? So you kind of know who's trying to push some bills forward? Because it seems like a lot of traction gets done with the lobbying coalitions out there.
Sure. I know I've talked to a few lobbyists over the last few years at Law 360. I can't speak for other reporters. I don't know if they're, a major source, but there are some that we've connected with sometimes who, you kind of can give us a heads up if something's moving, or, we can reach out to them and say, hey, this is coming up for a committee hearing. Do you have a stance on it? How much traction do you think this can get, either on a floor vote or before the panel? So that is, lobbyists are one source that we can go to. Probably others would be certainly any type of policy think tanks in the states that we're covering, even national ones. Of course, Tax Foundation, ITEP, things like that. And, and also just tax practitioners too, who maybe not be testifying, but are certainly following a bill. And, we can chat with them and see what the bill may mean for their practice or the industry in general.
Yeah, which I know you do, because you've reached out to different practitioners to get opinions on, proposed legislation to see what the impact's going to be to the community. So.
Well, yeah, because we even had a conversation right after I think it was almost right after the kind of the open public comment on the retail delivery fee for Colorado. Judy and I had a conversation with Law 360. That was a fun one.
People are very upset about that. And I know, I mean, we don't know. I mean, I think the jury is still out on whether we're going to get rid of that fee. There is a lot of ammunition against it. Now that people know about it, they are just up in arms about it. So,
well, that'll be interesting too, just to see, because I think Colorado is kind of first in kind to do that. If that holds true, whether or not, other states are going to do it, because why not? If
well,
you
that's
can,
where the
why
problem
not?
goes. Once one starts, we see the ripple effect.
Right.
I mean, we've never seen laws in my entire 27 plus year career. I've never seen laws enacted by every state within a period of 2 years. And every state has a Wayfair law now. That's crazy. To that momentum since 2018.
Well, and I'm getting my first wine club shipment post delivery fee, and there it is, 27 cents. I was very surprised.
I just got something and there was no delivery fee from a Colorado taxpayer. So I need to make them aware of it because they're actually a client, because they didn't impose it. So somehow, some way, they didn't get word of it. So whatever shipment they sent didn't have the 27 cents collected from me. So we're not seeing full compliance on this fee, because it's not a simple thing to enact into your invoicing systems.
Right. Well, Paul, I know, we've kind of talked about some cases and, what, from our position, we have a differing kind of what's interesting, what's not. And you had mentioned kind of that Zilka case out of Philadelphia that had to do with, residency, non-residency, credit for taxes paid to another state. So what were some of those issues there? And, why was that kind of a topic worth following?
Sure. So, the case is Diane Zilka versus Philadelphia. And when we had first spotted it, I think it was last year, maybe it was early this year, when Commonwealth Court opinion came out about it in Pennsylvania, which Commonwealth Court, it can be either an appellate court or a trial court, depending. In this case, it was an appellate court. Yeah, so the Commonwealth Court opinion, kind of jumped off the page because it said that essentially Philadelphia did not have to credit the attorney, Diane Zilka, for her Delaware state income taxes paid. And it had mentioned the Supreme Court's Wynne decision, which said that Maryland needed to credit some people there for taxes paid in another state against the county tax. And so right away, it would kind of seem to be potentially a split or some type of distinction from a U.S. Supreme Court case involving taxes paid to another jurisdiction. So, again, right off the bat, it just seemed like something that was worth following. And so essentially the case is the woman, she's an attorney, lives in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and would commute to Wilmington, Delaware to work. And she paid about 3% of Pennsylvania's income tax. Philadelphia has a wage tax, which is among the highest, if not the highest in the nation, at about 3.92% at the time. And then she paid Wilmington, Delaware's 1.25% tax and Delaware's state tax of 5%. And so essentially, Pennsylvania credited her for state income taxes paid to Delaware, so that wiped out her Pennsylvania tax liability. Philadelphia credited her for Wilmington's tax, which is about 1.25%. And so there was a balance left over of the remaining Delaware state income tax that she owed versus the balance of her Philadelphia wage tax. And Philadelphia said, no, we don't have to credit you for that. State taxes are different from local taxes. And the Commonwealth Court upheld that. It had went to a trial court prior to that, and it also found for the city. So one line from the opinion, it says that from the Commonwealth Court, it said, contrary to taxpayers' assertions, Wynne, that Supreme Court case, does not compel Philadelphia to apply an additional credit for any dissimilar taxes, such as the Delaware tax. So the case is on appeal now. It's before the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. They've accepted review. There's still briefing that's due. And then oral argument probably later this year or maybe early next year. But it's a case that some practitioners that we talked to said, it really, some thought that it ran counter to Wynne. Some thought that maybe it's a clarification. The court could take a chance to clarify when and when local taxes need to be offset, or when a credit to another jurisdiction whether you need to be issued a credit for taxes paid to another jurisdiction. So it had a lot of elements there that, just kind of seemed really newsworthy. And, certainly we're dealing with a lot of complex multi-state issues that, the taxpayers are.
Well, and I think this is
practitioners
such a
call it.
pervasive issue. What I found in my career as a practitioners would say, oh, you get a credit for taxes paid in the state out, the out-of-state tax. Well, that's not always true. First of all, you could be in a lower tax rate and you're making money in higher tax rate. You only get credit up to the lower tax rate. So you're going to still pay the difference. So that's always the case. It's only when the tax is higher in the state of larger income where the credit is worthy. And then you have this apples to apples comparisons of state, local, counties. We have, 13,000 jurisdictions in America that have a local rate. We have 30,000 water districts. I don't know if you knew that. We have a client that helps make websites for water districts. I didn't know there were 30,000 of them. So all of those have a tax base and a cost of giving you good water. Well, that's what we have at this local. So I think this is a really big deal. The Wynn case was a really big deal because I think, unfortunately, this misperception in the tax community about the credit and how the credit is taken against the taxes owed in different jurisdictions. And so this will be very interesting to see what happens. And then we have this layering of taxes. Like you said, there's a wage tax. Not every state has a wage tax. We have an occupational privilege tax in Denver, Colorado, and 4 other cities. There's 5 total in Colorado, $68 a year. Who's going to take that to law? Whether it's right or wrong, you're just going to pay it. So this woman, obviously an attorney, maybe a litigator, may be able to take a case like this up to the courts, but that's costly, time consuming, and you still don't have an answer for 3 years. So we're grateful that people take these cases up so we can get some more clarity around what the intention is behind these taxes and how they should be applied. And these auditors, they're doing the best they can with the information they have, but they need to collect the money. So it's a push-pull always, and not everybody can litigate these issues. So I'm very interested, and I think probably Law 360 saw the same, because this could affect a lot of people across our nation. And especially because we're seeing more local jurisdictions enacting local taxes, like this OPT we have. You're seeing more of that and not less, which is problematic if everybody wants a little bit. So, and then you're having more registrations with Wayfair. So you have more taxpayers getting, filing a Secretary of State or a sales tax registration in 46 states. They're on the dole now. They're known by the taxing community. The government knows them. You're going to have more issues that apply to all the taxpayers of America and abroad, frankly, that earn money in the U.S. So I think it's a very newsworthy issue, actually. I'll be very curious to see what happens here.
Sure. And from, the local government's perspective, I guess that could be a concern. Now, Philadelphia, when we had reached out to them for comment, I'd asked if, how important the outreach for comment after the Commonwealth Court decision. I'd asked them if the decision was important for them to, retain their tax base or not have to offer credits, to kind of wipe out or zero out potentially their wage tax or reduce their collections for it. And their stance was, well, everyone just needs to pay their fair share of taxes to Philadelphia. But if you look at the city's annual comprehensive financial report, I think it said that there's potential liability for up to 10 million, for outstanding claims right now, depending on the case's outcome. So, there is sure, yeah, I mean, and it's, so there is a revenue concern, you would think, on some level for the cities too. And I guess that goes to just, where I live in New Jersey, there's always this debate every year the budget comes around as to whether or not New Jersey should look at, the state's practice of providing credits for workers who work in New York for their New York taxes paid, which New Jersey does. But yeah, so I mean, there is a revenue concern for some instance for the resident state, or in this Philadelphia's case, the resident locality about when to issue credits and when not to. I mean, the city made the argument that their local tax is distinct from the county tax in Maryland because they administer it themselves. The county tax in Maryland was administered by the state. Oh. So they're arguing that it's not apples to apples, and they're a home rule jurisdiction. So whether or not it's the Constitution requires a local government to credit state taxes paid elsewhere, it's an issue that is before the court now, and some people think that's what Wynn said already. But it may not be clear, and some practitioners say they hope that this case can kind of clarify that.
Well, these kinds of logistical issues and taxpayer specific factual scenarios or what creates such a challenge for taxpayers to comply, to even pay the tax to the right bucket. And now we've got remote work. So she's probably not going to Wilmington, Delaware to commute to work in person anymore. So then is more of the money supposed to stay in Philly anyway? Anyway, it's just all fact intensive. And then how everybody gets a bit and a piece of the pie that you make. So I'm very, very interested to hear how this is all going to pan out. It's going to get people riled up, and other governments are going to fall on board. Even Colorado being a home rule state, you never know what we're going to do sometimes.
What do you mean? We are very consistent, very
confusing.
Very
We're
predictable.
very consistently confusing. That's what we are.